hey everyone, it's Emily, and I have not posted since my February TBR. It is now time for my March TBR. Things in February, especially in the latter half, were particularly crazy. They're going to be crazy in the first half of March as well, so doing my best here. I do have a December wrap-up filmed. I actually filmed it a while ago and just haven't been able to edit it, but I'm hopefully going to at least be able to get that up. I have a vlog that I have filmed and again have not been able to edit that hopefully I'll be able to get up at some point soon, but we're doing what we can. But today I wanted to check in on what I was reading in February, just check off which ones I was able to get to from my February TBR, and then get right into the March TBR. So in February I did read Joyful, and this is by Ingrid Fattel Lee. This isn't going to be a review, I'm just going to check in on which ones had been on a TBR. This was actually a holdover from January that was on my it would be really nice to get to list that I did get to towards the beginning of February. And I did read City of Bones by Cassandra Clare. And this was not on a TBRLand prompt, but I did want to join in on a buddy read and join in the Discord. So I think it's the A-Star book group, and so I'll link that information down below. But I wanted to join in, and so I did get a chance to read City of Bones. I read Love and Other Disasters by Anita Kelly, which was on my TBRLand TBR, I believe for a Book of the Month selection, and so I wanted to make sure I could get to that in the month of February. I did also get to After Love by Tanya Burr, and I believe this one was on the TBRLand TBR as a romance slash contemporary. And so I was able to fulfill that prompt and get that one completed. And I next actually DNF'd The Governor's Daughter by Sambath Maya. And this was a global read for Cambodia. It was on the TBRLand TBR as a global read prompt. Kim and I actually both ended up DNFing this one separately and like coming together after and talking about it a little bit, and we decided to switch this one for In the Shadow of the Banyan. I'll put an image here because I'm blanking on the author's name. So we're deciding to kind of sub that one in. I will get back to that one in just a minute, but I did DNF this one about 45 or so pages in. And then the last thing that I read, I believe was on my it would be really nice to get to this list, and this was Our Violent Ends. This is the beautiful Fairy Loot edition. This is the second book after These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong, so I was able to wrap up this duology. And the final thing is one that I'm currently reading, so this is the last thing that was on that TBR, so I did at least hit everything, and I have started The Obelisk Gate by N.K. Jemisin. Just started it like towards the very end of February, so not very far at all. I'm listening to the audiobook at the moment for the very beginning, although I think I'm actually going to physically read it while listening to the audiobook. I think that's going to be the best strategy for me for this one. But I did at least start it, so I feel good about that. And you know, I'll count that as a success on February's TBRLand TBR, and for February's TBR I think I was kind of on track with what I wanted to read and with what the prompts were, which is always fun. So let's jump into March. As I mentioned, this is a current read. Another current read is The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, and this isn't going to be a I read it and then it's done quickly kind of book. This is a self-graded course on kind of your path to creativity and reconnecting with your creativity. And this is supposed to be, you know, it's got prompts, it's got challenges, it's got kind of guided things throughout this that's supposed to take and is broken down to be taken over the course of 12 weeks. So this is going to be on my TBR for at least 12 weeks. So don't expect, you know, a wrap up or thoughts about this anytime soon. I just wanted to mention that I have actually started it, and I won't be mentioning it again for a while because it's not that kind of book. Anyway, so with that said, let us jump into the roles for TBRLand, and I think I'm going to do 4 this month. I think that worked out well last month, despite being busy, and since it's going to be another busy month, I think 4 is going to be a good place for me to be this month. So let's just jump right into the rolls. And roll 1. We have an 11. And global read. So the first roll was global reads, so I will go ahead and put Shadow of the Banyan. Again, I will put an image here, and this one is going to replace The Governor's Daughter. And I know, I'm not too sure what this one's about. I think it is about a family and their experiences during a very tragic time in Cambodia's history. We do also have a history book, a small history book that I've already read and talked about, and we also have our memoir is, you know, from around this time period as well, I believe. And we didn't only want to focus on tragic parts of Cambodia's history, or at least I don't necessarily want to, which is why we were trying to get a bunch of different things incorporated, because ultimately a country's history is not just tragic events that have happened, and that's not all there is to a country's history or its culture. But considering that we both DNF'd that other book and wanted another option, this is a really, really well-regarded book by a Cambodian author, and so we wanted to give it a shot and see. Kim is liking it so far, and so I'm very excited to give it a shot, see what it's about. I'll reread the synopsis at some point before starting it, but I'll probably be listening to the audiobook of this one and give it a go that way. But yeah, that was our substitution for global reads and the book for book number 1. And roll 2. We've got a 9 there. And we've got a Fairy Loot or Book of the Month. Okay, so second roll is Fairy Loot or Book of the Month pick, and so I will pick The Maid by Nita Prose. This was a Book of the Month selection in January, I believe, and I'm super excited to get to this. So I'm glad I put Fairy Loot or Book of the Month as one of my prompts, because it has been a great way to make sure that I can actually get these onto my TBR. This follows a maid at a hotel who finds someone murdered in one of the rooms that she goes in to clean, and kind of gets caught up in this investigation. So pretty excited to read this. I've been hearing some really great things, and I might use an Audible credit to get the audiobook as well, because I've heard great things about the audiobook. So we'll see how I go about this one, but I'm gonna put The Maid by Nita Prose on the TBRLand TBR. And roll 3. And we have 15. And another Fairy Loot or Book of the Month. And roll number 3 was another Fairy Loot or Book of the Month pick. Since I picked Book of the Month for the first one, I'll go ahead and put a Fairy Loot on my TBR, and we'll go ahead and put a Jade of Fire Gold by June C.L. Tan on the TBR. This was, I mentioned this one in January as one of my, oh, it'd be really great to get to this one. Didn't quite get to it, so I'm really glad that I can actually officially be on this TBRLand TBR. Not too familiar with what this one is about, but it is a Fairy Loot that I need to get to, and I've been hearing great things about it. So very excited to get to this one. So I believe this follows 2 people whose paths intercross. One of them, through this meeting, is able to find out more about their history that they really didn't know much about, and the other is trying to reclaim the throne, and they're kind of teaming up together to accomplish both of those things. That's really, I think it has something to do with that, but I'm excited to dive in and find out. And let's go to the last roll. And roll 4. 16. have another global read. Okay, and rule number 4 was another global read, so maybe I'll be able to actually catch up with Kim, hopefully, and we'll be able to kind of keep on track with our goals here. I'm gonna go ahead and put Cambodian folk stories on the TBR. This is a relatively short, I think it's under 100, or right around 100 pages, and is a collection of folk stories from Cambodia that someone was able to collect and write down. And yeah, I'm excited to get to it. I think one of the things that we wanted to do, as I mentioned, was just get a lot of different kinds of stories, fiction, nonfiction, different genres, different time periods, and you know, when we're choosing books for a country. And so I think having folk tales in there is just a great way to kind of break up some of the other stories, really get to kind of some of the lore and legend, and yeah, as I said, folk stories from different countries, and I'm always excited to dive in and read those. So I'm very excited to read some Cambodian folk stories and see what that's like. So this is going to be the final book on the TBRLand TBR. Of course, there are some others that I'm hoping to get to, as always. I still have not been able to get to Dune Messiah by Frank Herbert, even though this was on the TBRLand TBR for January. It did not end up happening. And I knew I probably wouldn't get to it in February. I was prioritizing some other romances in February because it wasn't what I was in the mood in for February. But I'm going to re-put this in as a priority, even though I couldn't get it onto the TBR. I'm really excited for this one. I believe this was a deck of cards prompt for a 5-star prediction. I'm excited to continue. It's not actually nearly as long as the first book in the Dune series was, or the Dune Chronicles, so hopefully I can get to this. I mentioned this one in my February TBR, but I also mentioned that the audiobook is actually coming out March 1st. And so one of my favorite narrators is actually one of several narrators for this book, and so I'm tempted to get the audiobook and read it that way, maybe read it physically as well, but and so I knew I probably wouldn't prioritize this in February because I would want to wait for the audiobook to come out in March, but it is about to come out, so maybe I'll get to this. And you know, I didn't get to The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo last month, which was a historical romance of sorts that I was wanting to get to. This was on the official TBR in January for, I think it was a Jesse's deck of TBR card prompt for a book that had an adaptation, and I still have not read this yet, and I'm very excited to do so. And of course I always have more Fairy Loots and Book of the Months that I want to get to. So my next Book of the Month pick that I'm super excited about is The Magnolia Palace by Fiona Davis, and this one follows like the history of this family in New York in a historical time period, and you follow a couple of different timelines to tell the story. I'm super intrigued by this one. I'm not sure if I'll get to it, but it is a Book of the Month book I'm very excited to get to, so we'll see. There's also Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber as another Fairy Loot option. That's kind of my secondary Fairy Loot option. One question I have on this one, if you happen to know, I know this is, or my understanding is that it's set in the world of her Caraval series, but I've heard conflicting things about whether you can start with this one if you have not read the Caraval series. I've both heard that it's fine, it's just set in the same world, but it's a different story and it's not going to ruin it's not going to spoil the Caraval series, but I've also heard that it could spoil some of the things about the ending of the Caraval series. If you know one way or another whether this is okay to read without reading the Caraval series first and not wanting things to be spoiled, if you could let me know, that would be fantastic. Some advice would be greatly appreciated. And yeah, I think that's going to do it for the moment. So a lot of exciting stuff that I have on deck. Of course, more than I'll probably get to in the month of March but we're gonna do our best. And so thank you so much for watching. Let me know what's on deck for you to read in March. What are you most excited about that you're hoping to read in the month of March? And of course, subscribe for more bookish content. I will leave some more information down below that I mentioned earlier in the video, as well as my Twitter and Instagram, and more information about how you can support the Black Lives Matter movement. And I will see you in the next one. Bye everyone.